The town of Ashwood lay quiet under the heavy sun, its streets lined with peeling paint and whispers that carried farther than the wind. Ethan Cole, a former Marine, had long since stopped searching for belonging. He lived in a cabin at the edge of town, where silence wrapped around him tighter than the uniform he once wore. To most, he was a ghost of a man, someone who had survived wars abroad only to return broken, empty, and unwilling to speak. But there was one figure he could not ignore. Each week, he saw her near the crumbling steps of the old church, Maria Alvarez, the woman the town had marked as unclean. She swept the broken glass from the steps, tended the weeds between the stones, as though caring for a place that no one else wanted. Her presence alone drew stares like knives. Children shouted slurs their fathers had taught them. Women crossed the street rather than pass her shadow. Ethan watched it all from a distance, his hands clenched in silence. He remembered one afternoon too vividly. A boy, no more than 12, hurled a bottle that shattered at Maria's feet. Laughter rose sharp and cruel from the group of men lounging outside the diner. She did not flinch. She lifted her chin and kept walking, the shards crunching beneath her shoes. Ethan stood frozen by his truck, every muscle tight, but he said nothing. That silence followed him home like a curse. It gnawed at him in the dark, louder than any battlefield he had known. Because deep inside, Ethan understood the truth. The cruelty of others did not haunt him as much as his own cowardice. The rain came suddenly, hammering the tin roofs of Ashwood like 1,000 fists. Ethan Cole stood at his cabin window, watching the storm roll in, his chest heavy with the same silence that had haunted him for years. He thought of Maria Alvarez out there, alone, with nothing but that torn shawl she always wrapped around her shoulders. For reasons he refused to name, his feet moved before his mind could stop them. He gathered what little he had, half a loaf of bread, a jar of beans, a bottle of water, and slipped them into a worn canvas bag. The storm soaked him through as he crossed the dirt path toward the abandoned church. The building loomed in the dark, its broken windows glowing faint from the lightning. And there she was, Maria, huddled at the doorway, her shawl clutched tight, her face pale in the flash of stormlight. Ethan approached slowly, careful not to startle her. He set the bag down on the steps, keeping his distance. His voice came rough, almost foreign to his own ears. "You might need this." Her head snapped up, eyes sharp, guarded like a cornered animal. She did not reach for the bag at once. Instead, she searched his face, as if weighing his intent. The rain roared between them, filling the silence. Finally, she pulled the bag toward her without a word, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched it. Ethan backed away, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. For the briefest moment, he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not gratitude, not trust, but the smallest recognition that someone had tried. That was enough. He turned, walking back into the storm, his chest unsteady but lighter than it had been in years. The storm did not end quickly. Hours later, a knock echoed faintly against Ethan's cabin door. He opened it to find Maria, rain-soaked, her torn shawl clinging to her shoulders. She held the canvas bag untouched, her eyes unreadable. "I didn't come for this," she said, extending it toward him. Her voice was thin, trembling between defiance and exhaustion. "The storm broke my shelter." Ethan stepped aside without a word. She entered cautiously, her gaze darting around the sparse cabin as if every corner hit a trap. She did not remove the shawl, did not sit until he motioned toward a chair by the fire. The air between them was taut, the silence thicker than the walls. "You think me weak," she said suddenly, her eyes burning. Ethan shook his head. His words came low, steady. "No, I carried you here earlier because you had collapsed. But weakness? No, I know strength when I see it." For the first time, her eyes softened, though only slightly. The firelight caught the bruises hidden beneath her shawl, and Ethan forced himself to look away, not with pity but with respect. The silence shifted then, not warm, not yet, but no longer hostile. She rested her head back, and despite herself, drifted towards sleep. Ethan sat by the fire through the night, watching over her. For the first time in years, his solitude no longer felt like a cage, but a choice he didn't want to make anymore. Whispers had grown into open laughter. By the time Ethan walked into town for supplies, every eye followed him. Every voice carried Maria's name like a curse. Sheriff Randall Pike leaned against the post outside the saloon, his smirk wide, a toothpick rolling between his teeth. "Heard you've been keeping company with that Alvarez woman." Pike drawled, his voice loud enough for the street to hear. Men chuckled, women whispered, children pointed. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The silence had once been his shield. Now it was a weight crushing his chest. Maria appeared then, walking down Main Street with her head high, her shawl clutched around her shoulders. The street went quiet, every stair sharp as glass. A boy tossed a stone that struck near her feet, and the crowd erupted in cruel laughter. Before he realized it, Ethan moved. He stepped between Maria and the crowd, his shoulders squared, his voice steady. "Enough!" The sheriff spat into the dust, eyes narrowing. "Look at this, folks. Mercer's guarding her now. Guess that makes him just as filthy." More laughter, sharper this time. Maria froze. Her chin lifted though her eyes burned with humiliation. Pike moved closer, his hand twitching as if to strike her. Ethan caught his wrist midair. The crack of stop motion louder than the storm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "No more," Ethan said, his grip iron. His silence was broken, and the town knew it. The crowd froze, breath caught in the hot afternoon air. Sheriff Pike struggled in Ethan's grip, his pride cracking under the weight of the moment. When Ethan finally released him, the sheriff stumbled back, fury darkening his face. "You'll regret this, Mercer." Pike spat, but his voice no longer carried the same power. Whispers rippled through the crowd, uneasy, uncertain. And then from the back, a trembling voice rose. Reverend Thomas Gray, the old preacher, stepped forward, his Bible clutched against his chest. His eyes, tired but steady, swept over the people. "Mercy makes no one unclean," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor. "This woman is a child of God as much as any here. If we cast her out, we cast out our own souls." The word struck deeper than Ethan's defiance. Murmurs shifted. Some men lowered their gazes. Mothers pulled their children closer, no longer with contempt but with shame. Pike's jaw tightened. "You're gonna let one broken-down preacher shame you all?" he barked. But no one answered. The silence was heavier than his threats. Ethan turned to Maria then, his eyes steady, and slowly extended his hand. For a long heartbeat, the world seemed to wait. Maria's breath trembled, but she placed her hand in his. Fingers intertwined, unyielding. Together, they stood before the town, not as outcasts and cowards, but as something unbreakable. And in that silence, Pike felt his authority slip, like dust between his fingers. The crowd parted in silence as Ethan and Maria walked forward, their hands still clasped. The shawl that once clung to her shoulders like a prison now hung loose in her other hand, folded not as shame, but as a burden set down. Step by step, they left the square behind. No one moved to stop them. The whispers that had once chained Maria now crumbled under the weight of her defiance, and the town was left to face its own reflection in the dust. At the edge of Main Street, Maria paused. The morning sun broke through storm clouds, painting her face in gold. She turned to Ethan, her voice low, steady. "You shouldn't have stood with me." Ethan's jaw eased, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "I should have stood with you long ago." Her eyes searched his and softened. She laid the shawl on the ground as if to bury it forever, and together they walked on, into the open horizon, where judgment could not reach them. Because sometimes strength is not in silence, but in the choice to speak. And sometimes love begins not with passion, but with the courage to stand side by side. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us tell more stories of courage, redemption, and hope. Until next time, keep standing for what is right.